U.S. airstrikes hitting key targets linked to Iranian-backed terror groups this week as the Pentagon reveals that the regime's proxy forces have mounted at least 20 attacks on U.S. bases and personnel since October 17th.
It's a lot of red dots, a lot of attacks, a lot of land to cover. But this is far from the first time they've hit U.S. targets, of course, through these proxy groups. So let's go off the wall and examine how Iran's infamous Revolutionary Guard Corps, which orchestrates proxy attacks, or an arm of it does, expanded their terror network across the globe. So when you look at this map, here's Iran, there's Israel. U.S. maintains bases in the north of Iraq and southeast Syria, all of which in the last 20 days at some level will have been targets of Iranian-backed groups.
And I think what's important is before these last 20 days, it was quiet. For almost 6 months, none of this. So this has been an explosion of attacks just since the war in Israel began.
Say what you want, whether these troops should be here per se, but if Iran wants to fund Hezbollah in Lebanon, they've got to go through Syria and Iraq, which is part of the reason why those bases are positioned where they are, in addition to oil fields and other dynamics.
So we talk a lot about Iran being behind Hamas or other proxies around the globe, those that are perpetrating the attacks before you. So let's talk about how Iran does so. Let's begin with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Now, it's an independent branch of the Iranian armed forces. Pete, it was originally designed, and is always the one that is referenced when it comes to terror, but it was originally designed by the mullahs after the revolution in Iran in 1979 to protect the mullahs from ever losing power.
Correct, because there were multiple coups in Iran, and once the Islamists took over, they didn't want that to happen to them. So there's a standing army in Iran, and then there's the IRGC, which is meant to protect the House of Khomeini and those that have took over after the revolution in 73. In 52, there was a coup. Americans put in the Shah. The Shah was friendly to the West, even friendly to Israel. Once the revolution happened in 73, they said this isn't going to happen again, so they created their own military.
So what began as sort of a secret police or a secret service has evolved over time. And the big inflection point of that evolution was the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq war, where they began to take on more military responsibilities. Today, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has essentially an air force, an army, a navy, and their own intelligence service as well, where it's, as we point out, an independent army within an army.
The most powerful army inside that expansive country. By the way, ironically, in that Iran-Iraq war, we were allied with Iraq fighting against Iran. So this is a very complex story, and we're ultimately just sticking to the Iranian portion of it and what they're trying to meddle and do in the world. So in that Iran-Iraq war, Will, you started to see an expansion of the IRGC's role, not just protecting at home, but exporting the views of revolution. Yeah,
and so we talk about Hamas, we talk about Hezbollah, the group that you often hear referenced is the Quds Force. This became active during the Lebanese Civil War, and they set up bases throughout the Middle East, now in Afghanistan, beyond the Middle East, over to Afghanistan, back over to Iraq, Lebanon, and as we know now, helping Hamas in Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah, this is formally, the Quds Force is formally their expeditionary force. If they want to export Islamic views and values, they do it through that arm. It started in destabilizing Lebanon, which is what created the opportunity for Hezbollah, which is the most powerful force north of Israel. But also in Afghanistan, Iraq, we're gonna lay out some examples shortly of how the Quds Force tried to foment this Shia Islamist view of the world in a neighborhood almost exclusively that's Sunni Muslim.
Yeah, and I corrected myself from it being exclusively focused on the Middle East, because you can see here, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Another group that we don't often talk about enough is the Houthis in Yemen, where there's been a civil war going on there for quite some time. That's a offshoot of Shiite Islam. Really, the only Sunni group is Hamas in Gaza that's affiliated with the Quds in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
The only Sunni group is Hamas in the West Bank and in Gaza that is aligned strategically with Iran. Otherwise, they're trying to empower Shia militia forces. Iraq right here, we'll talk about that in the Iraq war. In Syria, where they've allied with the dictator there as well. And all of it is to stand up against, in large part, Saudi Arabia and that bloc of Arab Sunni states, which might be why this war started in the first place, because Saudi Arabia was drawing closer to Israel. Iran couldn't tolerate that.
That's right. The suspicion is they launched this attack to get an Israeli over response that would distance themselves from Saudi Arabia. We might be seeing that as we speak. Take a look at the attacks that have been conducted dating back to the 1983 or so, under the banner, or at least under the funding of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the Quds Force. Starting with, you remember probably 1983, the Beirut bombings, the barracks of U.S. Marines, as well as the French barracks as well in Beirut, Lebanon.
And one of Reagan's regrets later on was leaving right after that, which sent a signal to the Iranian Quds Force, hey, when we bomb, when we strike, the Americans flee. So they've continued to do that. Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia.
This is to your point about the rivalry with Saudi Arabia. It was American forces that were killed, but Saudis as well.
Saudis, yeah. And this is a big one for those of us in the post-9/11 generation, fought in Iraq. A lot of the equipment supplied inside Iraq was supplied by the Quds Force, by Iranian-backed militias, EFPs, explosively formed penetrators. I was there when we started to learn about this tactic, so sophisticated that it wasn't being created by someone in their backyard. It had to have regime support, and it was clear it was the Iranians. So a good 20% of deaths of Americans during a certain time period were coming from Iran.
Yes, that seems so overt that it's undeniable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we did again mention the Saudis. There was the bomb plot intended to kill the Saudi ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C. That plot was foiled, but again, highlighting the rivalry in the Middle East between the Saudis and the Iranians.
And, you know, we were talking about hostages this morning. I mean, this is a regime premised on hostage taking. If you remember, 79, they took those U.S. hostages from the embassy from the university that ultimately became a big part of Jimmy Carter's downfall. I mean, they used those hostages to leverage defense of their existence.
This is a bit of history, but let's also show you really quickly the role they're playing sort of in the modern era. Qasem Soleimani was the head of the Quds Force in Iran. He was helping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad stay in power. So, again, the IRGC exporting through the Quds Force, not just terror, but military might to help a regime, this time in Syria.
Yeah, this is regime protection. Bashar al-Assad wants to stay in power, so he allies with Soleimani and Iran in order to back him up. Will, you mentioned the Houthi
mentioned
rebels.
the Houthis in Yemen a little bit earlier. The Quds forces helping there as well in that civil war. Again, an offshoot of Shiite Muslims as the rebels in that civil war in Yemen.
And 2019, President Trump acknowledges the obvious, which is this is a terror organization, IRGC and the Quds Force, and sent a signal that reverberated through Tehran and Iran, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, who's the head of the Quds Force, exporting all of that terror and against American troops for decades. I
think the real takeaway, and it's playing out in real time here with these strikes across the globe, is the United States and Iran doing this dance of limited strikes, lethal but limited strikes, and by proxy against one another, trying, I would assume, to avoid a full-out war, but essentially conducting a proxy war in the Middle East.
No doubt over who controls oil-rich areas, who controls strategic areas, who controls the areas around allies like Israel, and one mistake in the wrong direction. But it's been interesting. Experts told us killing Soleimani is a miscalculation. It wasn't.
Right.
So what is, what isn't, I don't know that we really know.
All right. That's off the wall. Now, Rachel, up to you.
Thank you, guys. Super, super informative. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.